I was halfway through untangling the last knot of wires in my tiny apartment when the knock came, soft, deliberate, and somehow impossible to ignore. My heart gave a twitch that had nothing to do with the light fixture. Through the peephole, I saw her, Elena, my neighbor from across the hall. She looked effortless, like the kind of woman who could wear a sweater from 10 years ago and still make it feel brand new. Her hair fell loosely over her shoulders, slightly mussed as though she had just run her fingers through it. She wore a casual dress, but the way it clung in all the right places was impossible not to notice. "Hey," she said, tilting her head with that easy, self-assured smile. "Can you fix my light?" I nodded before I even thought about what my mouth was doing. Yeah? Sure. I can do that." My fingers itched to run through my hair, but I kept them in my pockets, trying not to betray how suddenly aware I was of her presence, of the subtle sway of her hips, of the warmth that seemed to radiate from her even in the hallway's dim light. She stepped aside and let me in. Her apartment smelled faintly of vanilla and something else, something rich, like old books or leather couches. I tried not to breathe it in too deeply. The living room was dim, the overhead lamp flickering like it had a heartbeat of its own. She gestured vaguely at it, and I moved closer, trying to focus on the wires, on the simple mechanics of bulbs and sockets. But every time I glanced up, she was there, watching me with those sharp, curious eyes that seemed far too alive for someone in her 40s. "Do you do this often?" she asked, leaning slightly against the counter. The faint scent of her shampoo brushed past me, subtle but intoxicating. "Fix lights?" I asked, keeping my voice steady though my pulse was decidedly not. "Not really. I'm better at, other stuff." I trailed off, aware of how clumsy I sounded. She laughed quietly, a sound that made the small room feel warmer, smaller, more intimate. "Other stuff, huh? Like what?" I cleared my throat and forced myself to focus, but it was like the light itself had lost its importance. I watched the way her lips curved, the way her eyes lingered just a second too long. My hands shook slightly as I twisted the bulb back into place, and I cursed under my breath, not at the bulb, but at how unnervingly aware I was of her nearness. "You're really focused," she said softly. "It's kind of attractive." Her words lingered in the air, more than just a compliment, but not quite a confession either. I swallowed hard. "Thanks," I managed, fumbling with the switch. The lamp flickered once more before bathing the room in steady light. She smiled at me then, leaning forward a fraction, and I could feel the heat of her gaze sear into my chest. "I don't know, maybe I need more than just a fixed light." Her tone was teasing, but her eyes were serious, and for a split second, I wondered if she could see right through me, through all the careful walls I'd built around myself. The moment stretched, both of us caught somewhere between hesitation and longing, and then, knock, knock, knock. The sound at her door pulled us apart, abrupt and intrusive, yet somehow it left a tension behind, heavier than the dim bulb that had started this. I froze. She turned her head toward the noise, eyes flicking back to me for just a heartbeat. That look, half challenge, half invitation, sent a shiver down my spine. And I knew, with a certainty that made my chest tight, that nothing would ever be the same. I didn't leave her apartment immediately. Not because I wanted to linger over a light fixture, but because I didn't want to leave her. Elena stood there, one hand brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and I realized I knew almost nothing about her, yet somehow felt like I had known her longer than anyone else ever. "You don't live around here, do you?" she asked, finally breaking the silence. Her tone was casual, but the curiosity in her eyes felt deliberate. "I do," I said quickly. "Just down the hall. Apartment 2B. My voice sounded smaller than I expected. I forced a laugh. "I just don't usually come out much." She tilted her head, the corners of her mouth lifting. "You're a bit quiet." Her words hung between us, more like an observation than a judgment, but I felt their weight all the same. Yeah, I guess I've always been, I muttered, thinking about my past, how relationships had never lasted long, partly because I was restless, partly because I didn't know how to handle feelings that ran too deep. The thought of a connection with someone like her, someone experienced and self-assured, it was thrilling and terrifying all at once. I was married once, she said suddenly, her voice soft, like she wasn't sure she wanted to say it out loud. A long time ago. Not a good fit. It ended badly. She looked away for a moment, then back at me, her eyes lingering on mine as if daring me to ask more. I've kept to myself since. The honesty struck me. Here she was, confident, magnetic, independent, and yet she carried an invisible weight, one I didn't fully understand but wanted desperately to. My pulse thudded in my chest as I imagined the years of loneliness, the moments of vulnerability hidden behind laughter and composure. I cleared my throat, trying to keep my emotions in check. I get that. I've had my share of messes too. My words sounded lame, inadequate, but I couldn't stop the truth from slipping out. I don't really do relationships well. She studied me then, that sharp, unreadable gaze. And for a moment I thought she might see everything I was hiding, the hesitation, the longing, the way my heart betrayed me with every glance. Instead, she simply smiled, the kind of smile that suggested understanding, even forgiveness, and perhaps curiosity. Maybe we're both complicated, she said, almost under her breath. She leaned against the counter again, a little closer this time. My shoulder brushed hers. A static electricity sparked where we touched. I didn't pull away. She didn't either. The room felt smaller, warmer. A quiet intimacy settled between us, the kind that doesn't need words, just the shared awareness of proximity, of hands almost touching, of breaths that seemed to synchronize. For a moment I let myself imagine what it would be like if nothing else existed, no rules, no judgments, just her and me. And then, just as quickly, reality nudged me, the knock at her door from earlier, the forbidden thrill of wanting someone older, someone untouchable. And yet, the tension lingered. That small brush of her shoulder, the quiet laugh, the weight of her gaze, it planted a seed I couldn't ignore. I knew, even then, that whatever this was, it was just beginning. I woke the next morning with the taste of her perfume lingering in my mind, though I hadn't seen her since yesterday. My phone buzzed with a text from my roommate Jake, reminding me I'd promised to help move his couch later. Normal life, routine, but part of me wanted nothing to do with it. I wanted to see her again. I didn't have long to dwell. Later that afternoon, I heard her door creak open across the hall. I froze mid-step, wires in hand, my heart thudding in a rhythm that had nothing to do with fixing anything. "Elena?" I called, trying to sound casual. She turned, leaning slightly in the doorway, holding a stack of mail. "Hey, you're still here?" Her eyes flickered, and for a moment I thought I saw hesitation, or was it invitation? "I was just, checking the light." My words sounded ridiculous, even to me. She smirked faintly, stepping a little closer, and I could feel the warmth radiating from her. "You really are thorough," she said softly. Her gaze lingered, too long, and the air between us seemed suddenly smaller, charged. I wanted to step back, to remind myself why this was wrong. She was older, confident, experienced. I was younger, inexperienced, and we both knew how dangerous proximity could feel. And yet my body betrayed me, leaning just a fraction closer, drawn by some magnetic force I couldn't resist. Then click. The door across the hall opened abruptly, and her neighbor's voice floated out, startling both of us. I jumped back, hands fumbling. "Everything okay?" a man's voice asked. My stomach twisted. I hadn't expected anyone else here. Elena's hand grazed mine as she moved to respond, just for a heartbeat. That fleeting touch, it sent a shiver straight through me. My mind screamed, pull away, but my body refused. She looked up at me, eyes wide, caught somewhere between apology and desire. I'll just. She trailed off, quickly regaining composure. Her lips pressed into a line, the small curve of her mouth teasing, dangerous. I nodded, not trusting my voice. My fingers brushed hers again as I stepped back. Each touch felt like lightning, each glance like an unspoken promise. And then she laughed, soft, fleeting, almost guilty, and it was as if the world condensed around us, shrinking into that small apartment hallway. I wanted to say something, confess, admit how she made my chest tighten, how her nearness made me forget everything else, but words failed me. Instead, we just stood there, caught in the pull of something neither of us wanted to name. The man across the hall called again, asking a question Elena didn't answer. She glanced at me, a silent later in her eyes, and stepped away. I wanted to follow, to close the space, to claim that moment, but instead I let her leave. The click of her door closing echoed, but the tension lingered. My heart raced, my hands shook, and I realized that the attraction wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, something dangerous, something that could pull us together even as the world pressed in to pull us apart. And I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I hadn't meant to linger in the hallway, but somehow I found myself pressed against my apartment door, watching her through the peephole. Elena was talking to someone, another man, older, laughing easily. I didn't know him, but my chest tightened with something sharp and unfamiliar. Jealousy? Fear? Desire wrapped in panic? Probably all three. I slammed the peephole shut, cursed under my breath, and ran my hands through my hair. What am I doing? I thought. She's my neighbor. I barely know her. And yet, the sight of her laughing, leaning just slightly toward that stranger, made my stomach twist in ways I didn't expect. Later, she knocked on my door. My heart leapt and my knees weakened in ways that felt entirely inappropriate. Hey, she said, smiling softly, though I caught the hint of apology in her eyes. I didn't mean to worry you earlier. I swallowed hard. It's fine. Really. My voice cracked despite my efforts to keep it calm. I wanted to grab her hand, hold it, stop the world, but my own hesitation anchored me in place. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. It didn't seem fine. You looked upset? I opened my mouth to protest, then closed it. There was no denying it. My pulse betrayed me. I started, then stopped. Words felt useless. How could I explain that my chest ached because I wanted her, because I couldn't control it, because I'd spent the past days thinking about nothing else? Her gaze softened, and she took a small step closer, closing the distance between us. The warmth from her body pressed against my sleeve. My heart raced. My hands trembled slightly, hovering at my sides, unsure whether to retreat or reach. You're important, you know? She said quietly, voice almost a whisper. I've been so careful, but... Her words faltered. Her eyes flicked down, then back at mine, as if testing me, daring me to understand what she wasn't fully saying. My chest tightened. She's saying it. She's admitting it. I wanted to laugh, cry, shout, do something, but I froze. Vulnerability, raw and sharp, wrapped around me like a vice. I don't know if this is okay, I murmured, my voice low, betraying everything I'd tried to hide. I don't know if we should. She leaned even closer, close enough for our breaths to mingle. My fingers twitched, itching to touch her, to bridge the tiny, impossibly magnetic gap between us. The air between us was heavy, electric, a storm waiting to break. Then her phone buzzed on the counter, shattering the fragile moment. She glanced at it, hesitated, and the tension snapped like a drawn wire. She looked back at me, eyes wide, lips parted slightly, and I realized, in that suspended heartbeat, that nothing would ever be the same. We were on the edge. One step, one word, one touch, and everything could change. I hadn't expected to see him there. Not in Elena's apartment, not now, and definitely not laughing so easily with her, like he owned a space I'd barely dared to enter. I froze outside her door, the words I'd rehearsed. I can't. I shouldn't. Dying in my throat. My chest constricted, heat pooling in my stomach. That same jealousy I tried to suppress boiled into something hotter, something sharp. Then a sound. A muted cough from the hallway. I realized I wasn't alone. Jake, my roommate, had apparently wandered over without telling me, curious about why I'd been pacing the hall like a man possessed. His eyes flicked between me and Elena's slightly open door, the unspoken question hanging like a guillotine. Elena turned toward me then, smiling faintly, but there was something different this time. Something wary. She stepped back, almost instinctively, and my pulse stuttered. I need to tell you something, she said, voice low. Her hands fiddled with the hem of her dress, a tiny nervous gesture that made my chest ache in ways I hadn't expected. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. I haven't been completely honest, she confessed, eyes flicking briefly to the man in the apartment, then back to me. He's an old friend. I didn't mean for you to see it like that. My stomach twisted. Relief? Or was it the opposite? The line between trust and betrayal blurred. Okay. I stopped, realizing my hands were shaking, that my body wanted to reach for her even as my mind screamed, step back. She took a hesitant step closer. I like you? I want this, she said, voice catching slightly. But I wasn't ready to admit it, and seeing him just. I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted to laugh, or cry, or slam my head into the wall. Instead, I just stood there, overwhelmed by the sudden intensity of it all. Her eyes were pleading, her lips slightly parted, the air around us thick with tension and unspoken longing. Why didn't you just tell me? I whispered, the words rough, brittle, yet desperate. I was scared, she admitted softly. Scared that you'd think it was wrong, that the age difference, everything, would make you run. I swallowed hard. My heart thumped so loudly I was sure she could hear it. The world seemed to shrink until it was just the two of us, two flawed, desperate people standing on the edge of something neither of us fully understood. I took a slow step forward, my hand hovering just inches from hers. She mirrored the movement. The air between us crackled with possibility. And then, almost cruelly, her phone buzzed again, pulling her attention, and breaking the fragile moment. She glanced down, a shadow of worry crossing her face, and for a heartbeat, I wondered if we'd just lost the only chance we'd had. But when she looked up again, her eyes caught mine, and in them, I saw the same storm of desire, fear, and uncertainty I felt. Whatever came next, nothing would be simple. Not now. Not ever. I didn't think I could breathe properly when she finally stepped closer, closing the distance between us. The apartment felt impossibly small, the light casting soft shadows over her face, highlighting every line and curve I hadn't dared to notice before. Her eyes searched mine, hesitant, trembling, yet impossibly bold. I can't keep pretending, she whispered, her hand brushing against mine for just a moment. The contact was electric, a jolt that left my fingers tingling long after. I want this. I want you. I don't care about the complications anymore. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of every doubt I'd carried, age, inexperience, the whisper of society's expectations, beginning to crumble. I wanted to argue, to resist, but every nerve in my body screamed the same truth. I wanted her too. I don't know if I've ever. My voice faltered, thick with emotion. I wasn't sure I'd ever felt this intensely for anyone, and it terrified me. I don't know if I can stop myself. Her lips curved into a small, knowing smile, and she closed the final fraction of space between us. My heart leapt, my breath caught. The moment hung there, suspended, fragile, full of everything we'd tried to suppress. You don't have to stop, she said softly, her forehead brushing against mine. We'll figure it out. Together. Time seemed to slow. I could feel every imperfection in her, every hesitation, every scar of experience, and somehow, it made her more beautiful, more human, more irresistible. And in that vulnerability, I found a reflection of my own, the fear, the longing, the uncertainty, all tangled together in a knot that only she could untangle. I closed my eyes, letting myself lean into the sensation, the closeness, the warmth, the undeniable pull between us. My hands hovered at her waist, then settled, tentative at first, then firmer, as if anchoring myself to her reality, to the fact that she was real, and that she wanted this too. She breathed against my lips, a whisper of a laugh escaping, and I felt the tension of weeks, months of longing, dissolve into that fragile, messy, perfect moment. I've wanted this for a long time, I admitted, voice low, rough. And I've been afraid, but not anymore. Her eyes softened, glimmering with the same fear and desire I recognized in myself. Neither have I, she whispered. We stayed like that for a long moment, just holding each other, letting the chaos of the world outside fade to nothing. And yet, even in that embrace, I knew life wouldn't suddenly be simple. There would be questions, judgments, maybe even regrets, but for now, it didn't matter. And then her phone buzzed again, a faint reminder that the world was still spinning outside our bubble. She glanced at it, hesitated, then looked back at me with a small, mischievous smile. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. And in that instant, I realized that some things, some people, were worth breaking all the rules for. The world outside might wait. But in here, in this messy, human, impossible moment, we were exactly where we were supposed to be. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the thin curtains, painting her apartment in gold. I woke with a strange mix of disbelief and certainty. Somehow, after weeks of stolen glances, teasing moments, and suppressed desire, we were here, tangled together on her couch, half laughing, half breathless. Elena stirred beside me, stretching lazily, her hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. She smiled when she saw me watching, a small, private smile that made my chest ache in the best possible way. Morning, she whispered, voice still thick with sleep. Morning, I replied, though it felt too ordinary a word for the moment. We didn't rush. There was no need. Just the quiet of the apartment, the soft hum of the city outside, the way our hands found each other naturally. Every brush of her fingers reminded me of the tension we'd endured, every lingering glance reaffirmed that we'd chosen each other. You're really here, I said, voice low. I am, she murmured, leaning her forehead against mine. And I'm not going anywhere. It felt surreal, but in the best way, messy, human, impossible, and real. We had crossed boundaries, confronted fears, and faced the rules we had convinced ourselves would hold us apart. And somehow, we'd landed here, together. I thought about everything, the almost kisses, the jealousy, the whispered confessions, the shivering moments when our hands brushed. All of it led to this quiet, intimate victory. Not perfect, not clean, but ours. We spent the morning talking about everything and nothing, laughing at small memories, sharing coffee, lingering in the kind of silence that didn't feel empty, but full. Full of understanding, of acceptance, of anticipation for the days ahead. At one point, I caught her watching me, her eyes warm, amused, and something else, something tender that made me forget how old or young either of us was. We didn't need to say it aloud. The look between us said more than words ever could. And as she rested her head against my shoulder, I realized that life wouldn't be simple. People might judge, circumstances might challenge us, and there would be moments of doubt, but none of it mattered as long as we had this, each other, here, now, in all our flawed, human beauty. She sighed softly, and I felt her hand squeeze mine. "We've come a long way," she whispered. "Yes," I said, pressing my lips to her temple. "And we're just getting started." The world outside could wait. The rules, the complications, even the voices of doubt, all of it faded. In this messy, real, tender moment, we were exactly where we were meant to be. And maybe that's the thing about love, it doesn't arrive when it's convenient. It doesn't follow the rules. It sneaks in quietly, makes itself impossible to ignore, and changes everything. We lay there, tangled, hearts racing, silently promising that whatever came next, we would face it together. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?